Hey all, Chad Hastings here with Personal Injury Perspective. Today we're looking at the tragic case of Harjuing Singh, the truck driver accused in the Florida Turnpike crash that killed 3 Haitian immigrants, Herbie Dufresne, Faniola Joseph, and Rodrigue Dore. The question is, will the families of these victims obtain justice in the civil courts in Florida? This was a tragic but avoidable crash. The truck driver Singh was clearly at fault, and there still is a lot to learn about this case, and we're going to go into that and perhaps cover some more about this case in another video. But if the trucking company employing Singh only carried the federal minimum insurance, justice may not be served on this one. Let's talk about it. Thanks again for coming to Personal Injury Perspective. My prayers and my law firm's prayers go out to the families of these victims who died senselessly in this tragic crash. These were 3 hard-working people chasing the American dream, traveling north to Indiana when their minivan was cut off by an 18-wheeler making an illegal U-turn on the Florida Turnpike. There's even video showing Singh attempting to make this turn. Liability here is crystal clear. As you can see in this video, this truck literally pulls across the highway, blocking the entire highway, causing this minivan to crash directly into the side of it. The driver of the van had nowhere to go. This was an awful tragedy, and this video is really hard to watch. I can't even imagine being faced with having to crash into the side of a semi-truck with literally nowhere to go. First and foremost, there is no question that Singh violated traffic laws in causing this crash. Florida law is clear on this. Section 316.074 of the Florida statutes prohibits drivers from disobeying official traffic control devices, and Florida's emergency turnpike lanes and crossovers are marked for authorized vehicles only. Truck drivers and the general public cannot use them for U-turns. It's both common sense and that's the law. Singh violated both. Some have asked whether Singh should have had a commercial license at all. Evidently, he was an illegal immigrant, and this question is somewhat complicated, but there's plenty of reports about how he failed to be able to read the signs on the highway. As this case unfolds, we're going to want to know more about that, but it should be mentioned that federal law has been construed to allow CDLs for those who are lawfully present in the United States, and that's where this gets a little more complicated. Under 9 U.S.C. Code 1254, which is TPS or temporary protected status, and 9 U.S. Code 1158, asylum, an otherwise illegal immigrant with either asylum or TPS can be authorized to work in the United States and can be given a legal work permit. Now, federal law does not control the driver's license bureaus in the country. That's under the individual states. Along these lines, so long as the state driver's license authority abides by federal law, it can decide to authorize non-citizens with temporary protected status or asylum lawful CDL licenses or driver's licenses. As we can see in the news report, Singh allegedly had a CDL license issued in California. That's one of the facts that you see in the news. But if Singh's status was questionable, and if the company that hired him knew it, that could open the door to negligent hiring claims and even punitive damages against the trucking company. So now here's where we look at where justice is in dollars and cents. Even though no amount of money can ever replace the value of 3 human lives, under federal law, 49 U.S.C. Section 31139, a trucking company is only required to carry $750,000 in liability coverage for accidents involving tractor trailers. That's the bare minimum. Some carriers carry $1 million or more. In fact, the minimum requirements for transporting hazardous materials goes up to $5 million. For oil and gas transport, the code requires at least $1 million in coverage. Regardless, if this company only had the minimum, that's nowhere near enough to cover the devastation of 3 deaths. If the insurance company paid the entire limits of $750,000, if that's the minimum, that's a split of 3 ways, or $250,000 per family. That wouldn't be fair or just for this crash. If there's minimum insurance, these families would be left with a civil recovery of not even really approaching true justice. Now, please realize that insurance coverage does not always limit the plaintiff. A trucking company will want to insure itself at an enough limit where it's going to cover a loss or a death, because a wrongful death suit against the trucking company is not against the insurance company, it's against the trucking company. So if this trucking company carried federal minimum standards, these families could sue in excess of the policy limits. That would mean the trucking company could be required to pay money or liquidate assets to satisfy a judgment. That is, if they have the assets. The process of suing a company beyond the insurance policy limits is complicated and is a much longer process than when you're dealing with insurance. I will cover that in another video at some point in the future. Now, the final law we want to look at in analyzing this case is the Florida Wrongful Death Act. Unfortunately, this act does not always provide a victim's family with justice. Florida's Wrongful Death Act is specific about who qualifies as beneficiaries to obtain pain, suffering, and what I call the big damages in a death case. Think about it. If you cannot obtain pain or suffering for the loss of a loved one, that is a huge number in most cases. The people entitled to recover pain and suffering are the surviving spouse, children under 25, and sometimes other dependent children, and the parents of a deceased minor, and in some cases parents of an adult child if there are no other survivors. If you don't fall into these categories, you still can qualify for support and services. However, those claims are typically not nearly as big as the pain and suffering claims. So not every family member automatically qualifies. Whether this is fair or unfair, the civil law is meant to compensate those who both had a legal relationship and a financial or emotional dependency on the person who was killed. In this case, the families of Herbie, Faniola, and Rodrigue will have to navigate these rules to make sure the right survivors are represented in the lawsuit and can recover the bigger damages, as I call them. So let's get to the justice scale rating. Where does this fall on the personal injury perspective justice scale? I rate this case at a 5 out of 10. Liability is clear, but if the carrier only had $750,000 in coverage, that doesn't spell justice for the 3 lives lost. Also, we don't know about the survivors yet. But in my opinion, if even one of these does not have a family member qualifying for the pain and suffering or big damages, it's not fair or right. We probably will never hear about the recovery, but there is going to be one, guys. Believe me. I always try to be optimistic when evaluating trucking cases like this. I have 2 I'm looking at in my practice, and the coverage on both of those cases is over $1 million. Thus, maybe there will be big coverage on this one. Who knows? It is too early to tell. But I can only pray that when the insurance carrier is revealed and they get the declaration page, that this insurance company had significantly more coverage in place to provide these grieving families with the justice in the face of this senseless loss. True justice in the sense of this loss. More importantly, for all 3 families, what do you think about the case? Do you feel like the victims' families will obtain civil justice? How do you feel about the Florida Wrongful Death Act and its limitations? Is it fair or is this unfair? This has been Personal Injury Perspective. If you found this breakdown helpful, follow along as we continue to look at whether victims in high-profile cases like this one can truly obtain justice. Be safe out there, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. I will see you on the next episode of Personal Injury Perspective.